in the room. Okay, great.
Okay. Well, welcome. We're going to wait a couple minutes, for folks to transition over from probably their last meeting or picking up their lunch to join us. So thank you for being here. Give us a few minutes and we'll get started. Welcome. Thank you for being here. We're going to give it like maybe one more minute to let a few more people in, and then we're going to get started. Okay, well, welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. We're really excited to hear about Umoja and research. Two of my loves, personally, that might have been what prompted me to invite my colleagues here to share with me the great work that they're doing at their college and at the Umoja Central Office. I am Darla Cooper. I am the executive director for the RP group and former, I guess maybe they're telling me immediate past president of the board. That's if I have an official title, I guess that's it. Maybe after this year, I'll just be a former board president for the Umoja Community Education Foundation. But I'm super excited to have my colleagues here today to share more about Umoja, the program at LA Valley College, what's happening at the central office, and the important relationship between the Umoja program at the college and the research office at the college. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues to take it from here, and then I'm just going to listen because I'm excited.
Thank you, Dr. Cooper. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Dr. Ahmed Naguib. I'll be moderating today's dialogue, and I'm really excited because too often data in our spaces is used as a sorting tool, right? And outcomes and numbers, something that's done to people rather than with and for people. But the two folks I have with me today, Dr. Michelle Fowles and Dr. Elliot Coney, really embody what it means to do research in a human-centered way. We're going to explore the collaborative bridges that they built, the types of data that they utilize, and how they bridge local, state, and district level outcomes to ensure that the work they're doing is not only aligned, but supported and has a research IR-driven argument. So I will pass it over to Dr. Fowles to introduce herself and then yourself, Dr. Coney, before we jump into today's conversation.
Hi, I am Michelle Fowles, Dean of Institutional Effectiveness and Academic Affairs at Los Angeles Valley College. I'm also an adjunct in sociology and a proud member of the Umoja Advisory on our campus. Dr. Coney, you're muted.
You're muted, Dr. Coney.
Sorry about that. So I'm Dr. Elliot Coney, Counseling Coordinator for the LA Valley College Umoja Black Scholars Program. I also teach the Counseling 20 Umoja section as well, and do a lot of other things in our community with regard to our Black transfer and Black onboarding for our local LAUSD North schools. And I'm happy to be here as well.
So let's start with setting the context at LA Valley and the work you all do. Michelle, how did you and Elliot first build this relationship, partnership around institutional research on emotion?
To be honest, I'm not sure that he had a choice. uh, so we kind of had a culture of using data and obviously supporting Black student success on our campus. And when we were finally able to hire Dr. Coney, we had people before, but we had some issues. And if you've seen our other talks, you know our story. But when Dr. Coney came on board, we kind of said, like, here's a framework of accountability for Black student success. He had a vision, and so we just kept in dialogue, and that really was sort of how we set the framework for this work. There were no assumptions, even though we had, some things in place. We didn't have this program in place, the Black Student Success Program, in the way that he was able to envision and implement things. And then when we became, an Umoja campus, that wasn't in place. And so we just continue to stay in dialogue about what was happening, what the needs were, and how we could stay accountable at all levels.
Yeah, so Elliot, tell me about how you started to engage not only in the research aspect, but utilizing this relationship you had no choice in building, but I know that you all built, right? To really understand how to move with the Umoja program on your campus.
You're muted.
Okay. I came into a situation where, there was a lot of attrition before my arrival. There's a committee of individuals, Queen Fowles being one of them, who have been trying to push this work maybe 3, 4, 5, or 6 years before my arrival, and just have not been able to get this work off the ground. And coming into this space and kind of trying to learn the lay of the land, I just came in with the understanding of, like, I'm gonna try to find all the Black people and figure out what the situation is here. So I really created these connections with these individuals that were in key areas. It's not too often that we have a dean of institutional effectiveness that is African American. So, and she was on my hiring committee, so I felt like I had a nice relationship with those individuals. So as I got hired, I just went to them and just listened and tried to understand, like, what the issues were, where we saw the fault lines of, like, where the biggest impact could possibly be made. I think having an athletic background was very beneficial to me to build that allyship with our athletic program, and then we just hit the ground running. And they provided data, and I think I remember that I think the RP group at that time actually did some data for us, and we found out that about 85% of African American students were not being touched by any program on our campus. And of those 15%, the majority of those students were athletes who kind of had to be touched because they were already incubated into an area. So that's kind of where the initial um, collaboration started. There was already an intent, a purpose, a vision for what they wanted to do for African American students. I was just kind of the linchpin to kind of get that ball rolling and to, like, really do the heavy lifting of the day-to-day work. So, and I just think it complemented all of our styles, coming in with the researcher background, coming from San Diego State with Dr. Wood and Dr. Harris, and just really being able to use data, you know, to really see students, not just count them. And I think that that really was the big piece. And that's kind of the mantra that I think Dr. Fowles moves with, is just really using data to provide voice and to really humanize our students and not just see them as numbers. And we've done that across our campus in a lot of different ways with a lot of different co-conspirators. Scott Wagon in our academic resource center being one of them, who kind of helped us to lead the push to, help our program blossom.
Yeah, Elliot, you gave us a lot of nuggets of the things we're about to move into, right? Like the different levels of data that we use in implementation, allies, liaisons, co-conspirators, right? But for just this section around culture and context, I know Elliot, you mentioned, right? There's not a lot of Black deans of institutional research, right? VPs of institutional research in this state. But there are a lot of our institutional research colleagues, right, who are not Black, who are committed to this work, right? And so,
Right.
Dr. Fowles, tell us about how you built this culture, right, in IR at your office that stems outside of identity, right? That stems outside of what you look like, but the role that research plays in this work.
Yeah, I mean, I think my philosophy, and I've done, different trainings. I've always said, like, when I started this job, I think you could sit behind a cubicle and do the work, and that's no longer acceptable. And if we're going to look at institutional research, institutional effectiveness as a tool for liberation, right? Rather than, I don't know, monitoring and surveillance,
Mhm.
as a tool for advocacy, then you really do need to have some awareness of what is going on your campus, in your district, whatever the environment is, the community. And so we start out with the premise that the data is a tool, right, towards equity and not just sort of, I don't know, a weapon, right? And I think sometimes data is weaponized to reinforce systems of deficit, right? And so we always are looking at data as, okay, this is the situation, this is the context, what's the potential? What does this tell us? What are we missing? And then we need to get some more data, right? And that's not always going to be captured in some of those, higher level metrics. And so we're constantly approaching things with that particular mindset. So like Dr. Coney said, when he came in, like we had these benchmarks, we knew where some gaps were, right? But how do we fix it? How do we make meaningful change? That was a different level of data that we needed to be able to get to. And so we do that. We disaggregate. Most of our campuses do disaggregate, but then what? And is everybody looking at that? And is everybody looking at that through the lens of Black student success? And so that's what we do. It's not just the two of us, it's our allies, it's people in different spaces because we can't always, be in the room. And so I think that starts with my staff, that I want my staff to embrace an equity mindset. And that goes beyond, data disaggregation. And so they should be out in the field. They should know the populations that we're working with, understand the programs that, we're helping to implement and evaluate. I don't just see us as like providing data. I see us as partners in the building and evaluation of these programs.
So talking of data, right? The disaggregation of all the different types of data that IR offices, right, go look at. Um, what are those different levels and how do they start to connect to program implementation across the board?
Yeah, so I mean, I think recent RP, I'll say something I think you want to say, so I saw you, Dr. Coney.
I know you're good.
But I think like recent RP uh, papers have said, like, here's how here's who you're missing, when you're counting Black students. And that's something that we've been aware of, for a while, and we were doing that informally. So when Dr. Coney was looking to build the program, one of the first conversations we had was, you're never going to get all the Black students if we count them this way. We're going to give you
Mhm.
the list of any student who checked a Black identity, right? And so I think those are important things to, be mindful of. We also had the conversation when we started getting to the outcomes, because that was for, the implementation part, the recruitment part, that he might never see some of these in the larger institutional outcomes because of the way Black students are counted. But that
Mm.
doesn't negate the work that he's doing. And so we're constantly having these conversations of how the data appears, what data you need to be able to recruit and implement and monitor and then evaluate. And it's not always the same exact, information.
Yeah. I think I'll just add to that. I don't know if I could share the slide here, but I will try to do so if it's okay. Just to kind of give you a little bit of backdrop into kind of where we collectively are at this particular moment. And that is, let me open this screen really quickly. So share, and then here, about that. Slideshow, slide. So this is kind of collectively where we are now. And this is really how we look at our liberatory practice and how we center Black student success and belonging. We look to focus on three kind of pillars in this liberatory practice, and that's really building authentic trust across departments. And we do that in a lot of ways. We don't go out to faculty like, hey, you're doing this wrong. It's just like, hey, we're doing this right. How can we magnify or scale this up, right? And then blending the quantitative data with cultural knowledge. So, being able to provide that cultural piece from just the lens of being African Americans, the research experiences that we have, the lived experiences that we have, and just the nuance of how students might be experiencing the classroom or experiencing our campus. And then, of course, elevating the student voice. I think qualitative data is something that is iterative, but it's also live, right? And we use it on the spot to curate and like change and recodify all the things that we're doing. We use it in meetings. We bring students front and center to some of our campus level meetings to actually have a voice and to really understand like what's happening. And I think the biggest piece too is we kind of make sure that we validate and check in with these students to make sure not that the feedback is accurate, but that they're understanding and interpreting it in a way that we can tangibly mobilize and move stuff forward. So I think that that's kind of the most critical piece, is not just taking the data up, but bringing it back down to the students and letting them know like, hey, this is what we kind of gleaned from the surveys. This is what we gleaned from our assessments. This is the information that we're, understanding what's happening in our cohorts. What does this really mean, right? And then how can we make sense of that to make other individuals on our campus improve their practice? And it may not be everybody, right? Because some people might be the choir and ally, some people might be resistant. But I think that because we have a very important person in Dr. Fowles that not only does research, but she also leads our anti-racism committee. She does a lot of campus level stuff and has a direct ear to the president. That is a value and capital that I don't have. So anything that's, on her radar and my radar is also on the president's radar. And, we have a great president in Barry Gribbins, who also is a staunch advocate for the work that we're doing and likes what's happening here. So I think that this is kind of where we are. But starting from that scratch in 2019, we're at 81% persistence compared to 59% for non-Umoja. We have over 68% engagement of our students in our activities and classes and things of that nature. We had the most grad petitions last year with 57. And that's the most since I've been here. We had, I believe, 44 last 2024 spring. So again, we're seeing the increment of the work. And when we talk about closing the DI gaps, based on our district dashboard, LA Valley College has closed the DI gap in every category except transfer level math in the first year. And we're only 12 students away from that. Hopefully we can sustain that this year. And again, we use data to tweak that by offering more math classes and quantitative reasoning courses throughout the year. So students cannot not take math in the first year. We have it fall semesters, 3 different sections. We have it spring semester with 2 sections. So that's kind of really how we're actively using that data and moving that culture forward.
Okay, Elliot, I want you I want to drill down here on this example, right? The coursework that you're talking about offering, right? Talk to me about the anatomy biology example that we had talked
Yeah.
about, and
So,
where that relationship with IR also helped you make this decision on how to create course offerings.
yeah, 100%. So the beauty in the way that we look at the data is that, it informs every process in every part of our program, how we develop, how we grow, how we scale. And when we initially started with only 4 classes. We had counseling, English, we had a stats class, and we just had an African American history course. And from those 4 courses, we've now grown, I believe, into 15 courses, offering, I believe, 8 really technically 16, offering 8 in the fall, 7 in the spring, and then we have a hybrid course for the winter that we saw students needed, art and humanities. So we have a Black professor that does cinema 107, 105, and 103. So we looked there. But to your point about the anatomy and bio, we saw that we had a large population of students in STEM that were struggling, remediating courses, specifically a high population of nursing, aspiring nurses and nursing track students. So they were kind of outside the box of the offerings of our course and our cohort courses. So we were trying to figure out a way to group them up to make sure that we could provide some level of support, academic embedded tutoring in the village space, and then have them move together somewhat to be more successful and have each other to lean on in a STEM area where there's few and far between of Black students in class. So after our second year, we looked at the data. It was like, we have all these students that are doing bad in these particular courses or not doing as they were drawing, they're not passing. So what we did that following year is we created a bio cohort. And then we initially put everybody in bio so they can all move together. But we moved away from that and just did a mixed general pop course where we reserved 15 seats for our Umoja students, because what we found was that the nursing students and our high population of athletes who did kinesiology had the same STEM pathway. So because the athletes had to take those same courses and needed support, and we had high performing nursing students and some students that didn't do so good in those same courses, we decided to do a 15 seat reservation for anatomy or bio in the fall and anatomy in the spring. And then that automatically sets them up to take physiology in fall semester 2, or year 2 rather, fall. And then, they're able to stay on track to complete their allied health sciences within that 2-year frame, or if not a little bit shortly after, depending on if they did everything successfully. But it really created, greater sense of community within the STEM pathway, because typically we do have STEM students, but we only triage them by sending them to Mesa. We didn't really serve them in-house. So being able now to have embedded, STEM tutors in our office and in our classrooms has greatly helped us get over that, anatomy and bio bottleneck for our students. And now they're able to successfully complete at a higher level in that area for, aspiring nurses.
And what I want to say about that, right? Like that's Dr. Coney having the vision, right? But it's also those departments looking at their disaggregated data and program review, realizing that they also need to do something. It's those faculty who are taking the Black student Umoja ally training, right? So they're seeing this information in different spaces and being called to act upon it. And so one of the things that's really important when we think about data and accountability as a liberatory practice is that that data transparency should drive ethical action, right? And so we're trying to put it out there in different spaces and then saying, okay, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And then how can we come together to help Black students, succeed? And so it doesn't, we hope that what we are building goes beyond, what Dr. Coney does in the Umoja program, and that we're holding people accountable in other space, but we're presenting this as a model for action to support Black student success.
And just before we move forward, to kind of reiterate, I think the beauty of it here is that not just actionable in that way, but it's also something that is restorative. And, I think that the thing that we do here with data is we also disarm it. And, we present data in a way that where it heals, it improves, it gives not just success indicator improvement and betterment or progress, but it also allows students to realize that they have value in these areas when they typically think they may not. They can successfully complete these, quantitative reasoning and STEM level courses. So, we're also healing a psyche of trauma curricularly. So, I mean, it really goes into freeing up students to really know that they have something to contribute in every aspect. And we're dismissing the notion that, oh, I'm not good at something, because most students will come here and say, I'm not good at math, I'm not good at science, but I want to be an engineer. So, I mean, we make sure that we use this data to provide the narrative, not only to students, but to the faculty that may be against AB 705 and 1705 and like what students can't do. And we use the data to disarm them as well, and showing that, in this Black subset of success that we have, that students are doing great in the first year completion of, math. They're doing great in the first year completion of STEM, but they have embedded support. You know what I mean? And that support follows them into the village as well. So if you give the support, if you give the resources, then, I think success will definitely follow.
Yeah, I
And
want to.
we're using both the quantitative and the qualitative data at like every point to kind of reinforce that, right? We're not waiting till the end to tell the story.
Not waiting till the end, right? Not waiting till things are all done and being like, okay, there's a few years of data now. Okay, well, this isn't working. Let's iterate, right? There's the live aspect of saying, hey, this cohort has a lot of nursing majors. And a lot of these students are struggling their first semester in that anatomy class, right? In that biology class. How do we approach that? I do want to answer one of the questions that is in the question and answer, right? Karen Green, I know you asked, you hear that Umoja was able to reserve 15 seats in a bio class just outside of priority registration? Yes, that is part of Umoja's model, is having instructors that come to Faculty Institute or Summer Learning Institute, right, trained in how is it that we teach from a place of Umoja's 18 practices, right? So that it is, one, better for the success of Black students, but also all students. And we have data that we've seen over the last year as we've collected that course data that works. And once that professor is teaching as an Umoja course, right, is saying, yes, my course is now an Umoja course, right? I built this relationship with Dr. Coney. I'm part of the faculty that supports. Sometimes you're not able to say, I'm offering just a whole section for Umoja students. Umoja might not have 60 students to fill a typical biology section, right? But we might have 15 in the program, 20 per semester, right? So what happens is faculty will hold seats for those students. And Dr. Coney knows that when he is signing a student up for a biology course, it's not any biology course. It's a biology course that is taught through the framework of Umoja's 18 practices, aligned with the language, the culture, the practices students are engaging with within the village space, within the Umoja program, within their counseling classes, their English classes, right? All of the 4 classes that Dr. Coney started with, right? And as we talk about how do you expand which courses you offer, right? Digging deep into this disaggregated data to understand what do students need to matriculate, to get to petitioning, right? To continue being successful. Go ahead, Dr. Potts.
Yeah, so I want to add to that because one of the other duties that I have now is scheduling. And so it's not just the individual faculty, right? So whenever we're looking at data, we want to look at, we're trying to leverage that data. There's a certain amount of interest convergence. I think when we had our conversation before, I was saying, like, how do we make it matter to other people, right? And they may not, I'm going to be honest, sometimes people don't care about Black students specifically. It's not that they don't care, but they don't care about them specifically, right? They care about their bottom line. They need to have enrollments. They need to have students in a class. And so when we are trying to build back enrollments in certain areas also, in face-to-face instruction, folks want to fill their classes. And if there is a way to do that, like you said, Umoja might not be able to fill 60 seats or 30 seats, which is why we ended up with a sweet spot of about 15 in some of these particular classes. In other classes, we have entire classes for the cohort where we know we can fill all of those seats. And so again, that accountability and how is that data being used in different spaces across the campus is really important. And so these are practices that, again, we've modeled in Umoja that we are using as examples for other programs. But it's the same data, same practice, but we used it with what we built up with the transparency and the accountability with what we built with Umoja.
Basically, if you didn't catch that, what she basically said is what works for Black folks work for everybody.
Yes, yes, yes.
And even now, also, Puente has joined our. So what we're looking at doing in those 15 sections that we have for STEM and sciences, instead of just having a general pop area, because we're under the Mosaic umbrella and Puente is our sister program, Puente is also sharing some of those other 15 seats in those classes now. So that's something that we just did this year, where like those classes that are harder to fill, STEM and you know, bio and some of the math courses, we're filling that class not with just total randoms, but programs that also have similar andragogy and pedagogy and practices and understanding of like the cultural experience. So those things kind of help us bridge that gap together too. And you know, it's definitely starting to take shape and helping our Puentistas to improve in those STEM areas as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's amazing, right? Because I think one of the things that may happen is that you have these waves. You have a lot of STEM students, right? The data starts to justify, and then maybe a semester comes around and you can't fill all 15 seats. And then someone is saying, hey, why are we holding seats here? Like, we don't need to do this, et cetera. And being able to say, no, these are assets, right, within our organization that we can utilize, not just from Umoja scholars, right, but other scholars that we know need this framework, where we understand from a data perspective that that intro STEM class tends to be the first hurdle to getting your STEM degree. If you can successfully matriculate that first anatomy, that first biology, the likelihood of you completing goes up much higher. So, pulling out, we've been talking about the minutia, right? But let's pull out to the state level. Vision 2030, right? System-wide goals, college level goals, district level goals. And Dr. Fowles, I just heard you talk about how do you make people care about the outcomes of Black students, right? And I know this is one of the key spaces of being able to bridge the outcomes of Black students to the organizational, district-wide, statewide goals, allows you all to do that work. So I want you to speak a little bit on that.
Yeah, so I mean, we all, you know, have these things that we need to respond to, these standards that we need to respond to. And so I think it's just important for us when we are putting the data out there, of course, we're going to disaggregate it. We're going to say where are our largest gaps, and then we're going to say, like, what do we think is going on here? We embrace qualitative data on our campus, so a lot of times we do have student voice, sometimes faculty voice, to also supplement the quantitative data that we have to let us know, like, this is where we're seeing some of the barriers, right? So we're thinking about things. We look, what's the national context? What's the context in the state, system-wide, within our district? How do we compare? What's our overall college number? And then we start to dig down into the program, right? And so I think sometimes there is a fallacy that you know, Black student success is just, you know, on Dr. Coney and Umoja. And we try to say, like, no, Black student success is everybody's business, right? And so, but we're always going to point out that number, like, how does this impact Black students, right? What's going on here? How does this align with our equity plan, guided pathways, those principles that we have integrated into our practices? We're very fortunate in that you know, our, I forget his exact title, but Dr. Coney mentioned him, Scott Wigan, who's, you know, over our Academic Resource Center, also one of our Guided Pathways champions, Rebecca Stein. We have a lot of people who are in different spaces where decisions are made, where data is reviewed, who will question, interrogate, advocate, you know, for Black students and to minimize equity gaps. So whenever we have planning sessions, we've written some guides that we're vetting right now for, you know, decision making and planning that puts an equity, anti-racist lens on everything that we do. So at least we can pause and ask the questions. And if you're not seeing that disaggregated data, the question would be why? Because we know it exists and we put it out there. It's not a secret, like everything is out there for everyone, you know, to see. And so there is a certain level of transparency that allows us to have some of these conversations without it being something that is unique to a particular decision, if that makes sense, right? So if we integrate it into our practices, it becomes a way that we do things rather than an aside. And so that's what we've really been pushing for. And I think we have like a small army of people who are in these spaces who will ask if they don't see it because they know it does exist. It's just become part of the routine and the practice, I think.
Yeah. So I know this next question, we could spend a long time. We could spend a whole hour in a webinar on this, right? But how do you invite people into this space, right? How do you figure out who is the person that you broach the conversation to start the allyship, the liaison, the co-conspirating with, right? And how do you go about that?
I also wanted to say really quickly, because there's a lot of work that has kind of been going on before my arrival, but mixing this in with the 2030 plan, I think that until you name something, you can't really address it, right? I think that one benefit that we also have that Dr. Fowles left off is we have a dashboard. And our dashboard is very expansive. It's very disaggregated. It's very like deep dive on to various subsets of our student populations. So because we're able to see our equity populations on this dashboard and our equity programs, success retention, it gives like really like live learning in like what's working and what's not. So we can look at different programs and say, okay, you guys are doing great here, but you're not doing great there. And that kind of helps us to move forward on our performance indicators. But looking at the allyship, I think that that was really the focus of my role is when I looked at the advisory, I needed to know who the players were. I needed to know who the resistors were. I needed to know who had the most social capital, the most legitimate capital. And I had to move through the minutia of some resistance because to keep it quite frankly, when I got here, the Black students were not the primary focus or the real agenda of our campus. And I think anything that was being done in that counter narrative space, which is where we were at that time, it was just met with like the normalcy of like the status quo of like what happened before. Like, well, the students are still not doing good. We've spent this money, like boutique programs, no more boutique programs. And like, I knew that it could work, right? And that was like the word when I got here. No, we don't want any more boutique programs. And we fought around those individuals, and between myself, Michelle and Jermaine Pipkins at that time, who's a dean and now who's back in Texas, we did the Umoja application and just boop, boop, sent it off. Like that was the first step of resistance. It's like we're going to do this regardless, and I know that this can work, and I know the students need it. So that is critical. And I think for me, being in an environment where most Umoja counselors might come in and not really understand the lay of the land, we live in this kind of cronyism environment where like you're taught to like be timid and docile until you get tenure. Like, don't make no noise. Don't speak up in this counseling meeting because But it's like that's really the culture of our colleges.
Mhm.
That's the culture of our campuses. When you're really brought here to advocate for a population not being served, everything that you do is antithetical to like the normalcy of the college. So you're gonna ruffle feathers, and you have to be strong enough to know that that's gonna happen. And when you do ruffle feathers, you got to know where your best allies are to negate or circumvent the resistance, because I didn't have a lot of support in student services when I got here. My support came outside of the student service window. And I was bumping heads with my then at that time
Mhm.
VP just because the agenda wasn't there and he didn't see the vision. And it wasn't really his vision to see. But I had Michelle, I had Jermaine, I had Dr. Morris, who's longtime faculty here, and I had Scott Wagon, who was the leader of the equity committee at that time for the campus. And we just pushed and pushed and pushed. And when I hit a wall, I would send those whispers or those text messages or those venting phone calls to my, uh, I call them the Black conglomerate on my campus. And they got the things done for me. They were in rooms that I were not in. They could they could ask the powerful question in the room. And when they asked that question in the room, it had then brought the awareness to everyone else. And most sensible people was like, this is a good idea. And so from that,
Yeah. I was gonna say that's the power of the champion, right? Like you have this
exactly,
champion like Michelle that
exactly.
can hold it. So
Yep.
Well, I think the other thing that this made me remember is, and you said it, but you didn't say it, so I'm gonna translate for you. When we do this, this is what we do. This is why we make a good team. When you work in a space that is majority minority, but also Hispanic serving, which are most of our institutions, and the large population are Hispanic, Latino. That is the focus. Because again, if we're just looking at it from a data standpoint, from the numbers, that's where, what did we hear? What was I hearing 10 years ago? The most bang for our buck,
Yep.
right? Because we're going to touch the most students, because that, when you just look strictly at the data, rather than looking at those students and those students' experiences and those students' lives, right? When you look at strictly at the quantitative data, when you look at it as data points rather than people, it's easy to do that. And that's what we were doing, and that's what we were perpetuating. And I say we because I was part of it. I was part of it, right? Because that's how we're trained. That's how we present information. And it wasn't until we really started digging deeper to be able to say, hey, we've made this group effectively invisible in this minority serving institution. So then we started giving them voice. Then the conversation started shifting, right? Because when your students are only 5% or less, or 6% or whatever it is on your campus, you have to think about whatever the population is, how do you elevate them and change their experience? And so that's something that if we do, institutional research the way that we did 20 years ago, it's easy to perpetuate those same, inequities. It's easy to reinforce what the system was already doing. And so we had to be able to flip that conversation. Once we started doing that, you know who your allies are. Because the people who were uneasy with that conversation are not the people who we were inviting to the room, right? The people who were uneasy with us shifting from the majority, and I'm going to say we weren't serving Hispanic students either. I might be in trouble for that, but we weren't serving them either. But because they were the majority, it was easy to make that seem, like something was happening there. But when we started to move with intention, things shifted for our Black students. They also shifted for our Hispanic Latino students.
Yeah. And a prime example of that is when we fought for space, the whole campus got a multicultural center. So that's how it kind of worked, right? So we broke away first out of a space that wasn't even serving us. There was a multi-shared village space, which I hate that idea. So if you're one of those campuses that have them, I'm totally against that. But whatever works, works. But the reality is that I walked in on my first day to a space that had a veterans mini center, a dreamers mini center, and I had a cubicle with 2 computers for Black students in my program. So on day one, with my lens, I knew this wasn't a conducive space, right? So we grew from that to the space that we have now, which is now a 2 shared classroom space. It's an amazing village space that's multi-use, multi-purpose, but it started with that fight. And it started with people that also didn't look like us making or asking the question. And that's critical too. Sometimes the Black folks don't have the voice. So you got to use those people that are really at the fault lines that can get into those union spaces, that can get into those other meeting spaces that we're not in, also in the Senate spaces. There's not a lot of us there, that can really raise and elevate the issue and the question and articulate the benefit, right? Because I think that value proposition has to be very great and really visible and tangible for even the school to move on it. Because one thing they don't want to do is waste money, is to spend money on Black students and then come back and see that the needle didn't move. So I think that kind of that kind of narrative piece that we deal with, but moving that forward just to build the coalition, I mean, it's critical. You always know who the co-conspirators are. The energy in a meeting, at opening day, at Senate, any actual campus committee you're on, those individuals that have the passion, that really speak equity, you can hear it. And those are the individuals that we sought out. And we also sought out very critical people in legitimate power for what we were doing. We had a VP of Academic Affairs at that time on our committee. We had several deans across EOP, Student Services, and academics. We had people that were in charge of classes, people that were in charge of academic support. We had financial aid because we had, registration issues and citizenship issues for students as well that we needed to work with these individuals. So having them in the meeting and then critically having the person in charge of data in that meeting that can always bring that data perspective every meeting and be look, hey, that's BS. This is what the data says. And that's powerful. That's the trump card in every meeting. Is we can fall back on this data and show that this is where the work is happening. And we're currently, on our campus, when anything is mentioned about programs or anything, really, Umoja is now first. And that is crazy. Every time our president mentions anything with the college and any program, Umoja is always first. And when that happens, you know that that's liberatory. You change the culture of your campus. You move people to understand that, like, now I have visibility and intention. And even if you know you can't serve a student, just knowing that a faculty will email me regularly. I get 10 emails a week asking me, hey, is this Black student one of yours? Even if they're not, and oftentimes they're not, that's an outreach data point. Now I can reach out to that student. I can bring them into the program. I can let them know about our benefits, but just the wherewithal to know, like, hey, this Black person needs support. Let me contact Coney, Rip, Jasmine, Michelle, Idra, Reggie, Clive, the Black folks that I know that are on this, committee, or Sherry Rodriguez. Like, that goes a long way, because now we can make sure that these students are not falling through the cracks. And that is kind of the biggest, I think, testament and, pat on our back that I give is, like, I just accepted an award for LAUSD North last Friday, being inducted to the 5,000 Mentors of Excellence, right? So, like, when you're doing community work and you've elevated not only on your campus, but now you're elevating in the community, like, LAUSD schools and the actual community organizations know we're here or participating in our events or actively co-conspirators with us. We've created something very unique here at Valley and in the Valley. And it's something that I think is taking a shape of its own at this point. And I'm just glad that, hopefully we can continue to sustain it, and hopefully our revolving door of administrators and faculty and presidents, and we're dealing with that right now because a lot of people are taking this golden handshake for our district. It's going to change a little bit. So we have to be able to pivot and, deal with the circumstances in front of us. But allyship starts with, the inner condition of the intervener. And that's where we focus on, like, the people that have the right inner condition, that's the people that we want. And you don't have to be Black. And I tell my students all the time, like, if I hand you off to this person, they're an ally. I don't deal with people saying that they're allies, but these are the people that have proven, who have shown and proved, have demonstrated that they love and serve Black students, and they care, and they're willing to go above and beyond, and they will walk students to my office or to the village space to make sure that they get help. And that's really the caring campus that we have. And I think that when you get the right people around the table with data, that's when the liberatory practice happens.
Mm-hmm. And to that point, like, on our campus, we actually do ally training, ally certification, right? And so, it doesn't mean automatic, right? You did the training, but it doesn't mean you're automatically, you automatically have credibility with us. And when we do that training, we start with data as a context, because, not a lot, but we're like, this is the context of the Black student on our campus. And this is why it's important for you to know this and understand this and think about how you can help remedy this situation and improve the experience for at least one Black student, hopefully for many. And so I think that we kind of, you see how we weave this through different institutional practices, from planning and decision making to, this ally training. And I think we also recognize, like, the intersectionality of our students when we start to dig deep down into the data. We have multiple programs. We're looking at if these students are served, in different spaces. So we're looking at it from like A to Z. And when Dr. Coney is saying, okay, well, he got a student who walked in, like, we're tracking all of these things, these transactions, in the hopes that they become transformations. So I'm like, you got to keep a log. You got to keep a log. And we weren't doing all of this on day one. So I know some people are like, oh my goodness, you guys, you have a unique situation. You build, right? You build and you raise your level of consciousness that all of these things can become data points. The end goal is to transform students' lives and experiences, right? And so you need to be able to capture that as well. But again, your institution, your colleges are going to want to know how many, how much, like, what was the change, all of those sorts of things. So you have to start figuring out how to capture some of that information as well. We are able to build staffing by showing the demand, the increase in demand, people who are using the space. These are all data points that you need to capture. Again, not unique to Umoja, but a practice we really started here because I was like, hey, you want to build this thing? This is what you need to do. Like, we're going to do this, right? We're going to test
Yeah.
it out. And sometimes, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect, but
It really isn't today.
No, it doesn't. I mean, and
This
it's
new
that
cohort this
couple.
year stressing me out, and I already got no hair, but it'll be falling out. Like
They'll be
this new
fine.
cohort. Oh my God, they're stressing me. But yeah,
and that's the thing, right? And then we're looking at it again, not at the end, but along the way to
Yeah.
know that if we need additional, interventions, different sorts of actions that we're kind of monitoring. So there's like the data for recruitment, the data for implementation, the sort of formative and summative, assessment. Anybody can do that. You don't have to be, the ally on the advisory group to be able to do that. Your IE people, can do that part. So if you are an Umoja coordinator, you really need to think about what your program is doing. What are your program, inputs and outputs? What are your points of measurement? Have a conversation with your IE people about what data they have access to. And then if it's data that they can't pull, how can you capture that? Sometimes before we had like pieces of paper, we had tracking sheets, and then we work on it and we build that up.
Yep.
And
And I mean,
so
I think we've got so technological that you're like everything's got to be QR code. But like, no, most of my career was what we did is that you had students sign in at the front, and at the end of the day, we had somebody go through and tally up, and you put it in the book, right? Like you put it in an Excel sheet, right? And um, that's the data that also helps with the student voice, right? Couple the student voice. Students say they don't feel like they belong, and also you couple that with here's the demand we have in our space. Now we need our own space, right? I think,
right.
like being able to bring those portions in. I know we have about 8 minutes left, right? And we knew this was, we have so much to talk about, so much to engage in. But I just want to make sure we close on bringing it back to the student voice part, right? And you know, how have y'all continued to include student voice, even as you've expanded the robust amount of data that is used in those spaces, right? I know it's student voice is so essential in the work that y'all do.
So I mean that's really the focus of anything that we do. We start with mobilizing the students, and we do that. We have a very robust social media platform. We use Instagram and TikTok. We always have students talking about their experiences in the program, and that's kind of like socially facing. But like internally, we use all the data that we possibly can. At our Black graduation, we get testimonials. At events, we try to get testimonials. We try to use post surveys as well as data, and we do an annual assessment where students, basically talk about our program and the alignment of our program intended outcomes. And then we also ask them to give feedback. And then that feedback is what we take and when me and Michelle do our ally trainings, like that's front and center. And like when you hear the student voice and the positiveness about how they feel about their courses when they see certain things or have certain experiences, that really humanizes, right? And then students know they belong when they start to see and hear their own stories in the data. And that's kind of how you take it back and you bring them to the table. And that's really where it's liberatory, because where really is the student voice on our campus? We speak for students, but how often do we let students speak for themselves beyond that one ASU rep or that one student trustee rep? They don't really have the true voice of the body. So having enough opportunities to bring students in every space they possibly can, making sure that they go to the president's visiting hours when he has those open chair meetings and hours, that they go and talk to him and express their experiences, making sure that faculty, when we do allied training, students also help do those as well. And we continue to raise the level of voice because I can tell you that it's testimonials, it's also reflection essays, and it's just various ways to get narratives. And when we have big meetings or we have those people in the room that come to our events, we just give them the microphone. Yeah. Whether it be a graduation, whether it be a Black History Month, whether it be just an outreach mixer, when we're introducing ourselves and just the impact that the program has had for them. And then they also get to hear the narratives of the students themselves when they post about programs and how their success has been in direct correlation to their time in this program. So when students transfer to Sac State and HBCU, graduations from USC, and they tag you or make you a collaborator on social media, that is validation right there. And that's really what matters most. Like, what are the students really saying about you and your program?
Yeah, and I just to add on to that, like no voice is too small. We do a huge event outreach where we have K-12 students come, during our Black History Month. We make them do a survey to get their
Yep. Oh,
food,
that's voice
to
too.
get their food. Um, and we get positive feedback from middle schoolers and high schoolers who have never had this experience, right? Who've never been around so many Black students, who've never been around so many people who cared about Black students. We use their voices. Even one sentence that we pull out from these, hundreds of surveys that we get can be very powerful in, telling the story and, including everyone, as Dr. Coney said, not just those who are, the quote unquote representatives of a specific group, because we're not always in those spaces. So we are always looking for opportunities to capture data. Even when our students go to conferences, we use a Padlet, that becomes a data point. Everything is a potential data point in telling the student stories.
I
And,
appreciate the, go ahead.
yeah, I was going to say one last thing too. I think I don't know if it was John Henderson or someone else, my good brother. He talked about like playing a video game and like the views that you have in video games, and it was like first person view, right? So that's really the critical part of data. It's really the main character energy and making students the author of it. And I think that when you present data, like, we give the narratives, we talk about like who they are, but when you make the student the author, then it really becomes humanizing and it really becomes liberatory. And I think that that should be the focus. And when you look at data, I think the question should be how, like who's the author of these data points? Like, how can we get that voice? How can we get that metric that where we can show the authentic and genuine novel nuance of what this data means in the lived experiences and lives of our students? Because until you get to that point, data is just data, and you can interpret it any way you want, positive or negative. We can look at the same data set and we can have different interpretations. And I think that that's really the pitfall of our institutions and our, statewide body, is that people look at equity policy and all these words and they just interpret it differently. Even in our own district, we have 9 colleges. We look at some simple wording and then every college does something different with it. So, making sure that we can create uniformity and consensus across those areas are critical, and just continuing to raise the bar for our students. And that's really the main focus for me to make it liberatory, is make students the author, make sure that they're visible, making sure they're seen, and making sure that they know that what you presented is really the correct interpretation of the lived experience.
Yeah, absolutely. We are at the end of our time together, but I want to thank both of y'all for showcasing what humanizing research looks like, right? Really being able to present in the moment, knowing that, like, how is it that we show up with students, knowing that there are numbers behind them, right? And I would tell y'all that, in our preparation, one of the facts that I learned was that the Umoja program at LA Valley has closed the equity gap in everything except math, first year mathematics, right? And I think, Ellie, you said that's 10 students away from closing the gap.
12, but
12.
hopefully less than 10.
Oh, see, like this is the point though that I'm bringing this up, right? The fact that we've gone from percentage points to number of students, right? And I'm sure if I asked you right now, you would probably be able to tell me which those 12, 15 students you're looking at that are in math this year that will, like, you're looking to close the gap, right? That personalization of the number of students, right? The overall outcome all the way down to the individual student. And that's the collaboration piece, right? The champion in IR, the person who connects the data to the real life work. But I hope y'all heard Dr. Fowles say she's not separated from this work, right? She's very much part of her practice is liberatory. Being part of the IR team is a liberatory practice, right? And I think, thank y'all today for modeling that. And I'll pass it to Dr. Cooper to close us out.
I will echo the thanks. That was so good. Not that I'm surprised. Full disclosure, I know all of these folks, so I just I knew I could just sit back and let it go because they threw it down as they always do. I just want to thank them for taking the time to prepare and to be here and to share. We will definitely want to share this recording out and need to share, especially in the Umoja community, because I've heard from folks, needing to establish those relationships with their research
For sure,
offices. And I
100%.
think you guys gave some really good nuggets and some, managing expectations. Like you're not going to be where we are immediately,
Not at
this
all.
like but you can get there. And here's,
100%.
here's all that. The two things that stood out to me, I loved, and I need to I feel like I want to put it on a bumper sticker or something. What Dr. Coney said about, I might not get it exactly right, but she said, you have to see them before you can count them,
Okay.
right? I'm like, I've been saying that, but you said it so much better. So I'm gonna steal that. I'm gonna steal that.
Yeah.
I'm putting it on the recording. I'm gonna steal that. And then for my friend Dr. Fowles, that you make the students fill the survey out before you feed them. I'm like, I gotta start doing that.
Look,
Like when it's
I
in
am not
person, it's
above
like
bribery to
that
get you
works
to
for
fill out a
students
survey.
and faculty and staff and administrators.
Your
So
ticket to food is fill out my survey.
yes, so that we need to
Easy.
do that a little bit more for those in-person opportunities. But I thank you all so much again for doing this with us, and we're going to promote this video because I think a lot more people
Yeah,
need to see and hear what y'all have to say.
for sure. And let them know that, we're just a call away. We could easily get on a Zoom to help anybody. So it's not a problem at all.
Thank
I
you for
think
offering
we might
that.
need to reach out about the RP conference in April.
I'm thinking that I was gonna say, I feel a presentation coming on, y'all. This is what happens when you let your light shine and
Yeah.
people see it. They
You
want to
know,
give you more opportunities to let that light shine. So
yeah, we'll
you'll
see.
be hearing from us.
Yeah, for sure.
Looking
All
forward
right.
to it. Thank you all.
Thank
Appreciate it.
Thank
you.
you all. Have
Peace.
a wonderful
Thanks,
rest
y'all.
of your
Thank
day,
everybody for
everyone.
listening.
Jennifer, are you